In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about brushes. I will cover some of the basic brushes and a few examples how they can be used. I'll start with the standard brush and go over a few ways you can modify some of its attributes. From the default scene, I will select the standard brush. As you hover over the canvas, you will be able to see the cursor for your brush represented as two red circles. The outer circle represents the draw size, and the inner circle represents the focal shift. You can change the size of the brush with the draw size slider at the top of the screen. You can also access the draw size with the S key on the keyboard, or hold down the space bar to bring up the pop-up menu. For most brushes, you can leave the focal shift at its default value. In the startup files, symmetry is turned on by default. As you move your cursor over the model, you can see a red dot on the other side. Symmetry is a great way to save time, so you don't have to worry about getting the other side perfect. You can activate and deactivate symmetry by using the X key on the keyboard. You can change the mirror axis in the transform palette. It is in this menu where you can turn on radial symmetry. Radial symmetry is a great way to create designs and patterns. Use the radial count slider to specify the points of symmetry. Now for a key point for how we use any sculpting brush. When we make a stroke across the model with the standard brush, notice how it is raised from the surface. You can use the pressure sensitivity of your Intuos tablet to control the strength of the stroke. The harder you press, the more effect the stroke will have on the model. The tablet pressure controls both brush size and intensity. If you hold down the Alt key and make a stroke, the brush now carves into the model. This changes the brush from a Z add to a Z sub setting like we talked about in the previous video. Using the Alt key is the best way to use any brush for fluid sculpting, for both adding to and subtracting from the model. We can change several attributes of a brush if we wish. Clicking on the stroke selector opens up a pop-up with different options. For this sample, I will change the dot stroke of my standard brush to freehand. This will create a stroke that is slightly smoother. Now I will change the brush tip. In the alpha palette, I will pick the image that looks like an arrow. Now when I draw on the sphere, the once rounded stroke has a sharper edge. By default, the standard brush uses a feature called Lazy Mouse. This auto-smooths the lines you draw. You can turn it off using the L key on your keyboard or in the stroke palette in the Lazy Mouse submenu. This feature is great for drawing smooth, long lines, but if I'm detailing or painting in a small area, I will turn it off. You can also add color to any brush by turning on the RGB button in the brush controls. If I wanted to use this brush just for painting, I can disable sculpting for this brush by turning off Z add. Now this brush just paints the model. Using these controls lets you customize the look and behavior of your brush. Another important aspect of sculpting is smoothing. The smooth brush is activated by holding down the Shift key. When you hold down Shift on your keyboard, the cursor will turn blue, showing that the smooth brush is activated. The smoothing brush will be the same size as the main brush, so if you need to change the size, you can do that by sizing the main brush. The smooth brush is a great way to keep your model clean while sculpting. A large part of sculpting is defining edges. Is the edge hard and crisp, or is it rounded? Knowing what kind of edge you want to create will help you create successful and appealing models. Using the smooth brush will soften any edge. There are a few ways we can get hard edges. The Damien standard brush is a great way to pull out the surface of the model to form an edge. To make the edge sharper, use the pinch brush to tighten the edge, or again soften it with the smooth brush. To define flat areas of the model, use the H polish brush. With this brush, use soft pen pressure on the tablet, or lower the Z intensity. Using these brushes is a good way to clean up mechanical or hard surface models. To create soft and rounded surfaces, use the inflate brush. This brush adds volume to your models. Using the Alt key for the brush can help you create holes. I use this brush to form depressions, like eye sockets. Another basic method of sculpting in ZBrush is using masking. You can activate the masking brush with the Control key. Hold down Control to draw a mask. It is represented by the darker area on the model. This mask will protect the area covered by it. You can invert the mask by holding down the Control key and tapping on the canvas. Once an area is masked, you can then sculpt on the unmasked portion. To subtract from a mask you have drawn, hold down Control and Alt. Now the masking pen will remove any previously drawn mask. Using masking is a good way to define a specific shape. Draw out the mask, invert it using Control-Tap, then use a sculpting brush to pull out or push that shape into your model. A brush that is good for sculpting, as if you are working with clay, is the Clay Build-Up brush. This brush gives a rough appearance and lets you build and take away large shapes. It is a fun brush to play around with and can be great for blocking out your sculpt. You can use the Smooth brush to clean up any rough areas. A good way to automatically clean up and define edges of your model is by using the Clay Polish feature. In the Geometry tab, open the Clay Polish submenu and use the Clay Polish button. Clay Polish will clean up the model, but you will also lose a little detail. Use it to continually refine your model as you work. One last brush I want to cover is the Move brush. This brush lets you define major forms and shapes. Resize the cursor to the size you need. The Move brush works in screen space, meaning it works best at the edges of the model. Notice how the model moves when I pull the brush from the side and from the front. To pull the mesh towards you, hold down Alt while using the Move brush. This will pull or push the mesh. This is just a few of the basic brushes, but it will get you started.